Okay, we're recording. Hi, my name is Angelique, and I am here with my friend Kara for another book chat. You might have seen the one we did last month on Halloween, where we talked about witchy books. We have different categories today. But first, I want to say hello, Kara. Happy Thanksgiving.
Oh, happy Thanksgiving to you, Angelique.
I hope you had a nice holiday.
Oh, we ate way too much and then fell asleep at about 9 o'clock, which was about,
Perfect.
about the right way to do the holiday. How about you guys?
Yeah, it was really nice. We're not used to cooking for so few people, and so there's lots of leftovers, of course. But it was a very sort of relaxed, fun dinner, very relaxed day. And it's been nice. And we were watching a couple of episodes of My Hero Academia because my kids really like it, and so we were watching a couple of episodes of that last night as sort of as a family, and I very nearly fell asleep in the middle of the anime. So it was a nice, very low key, relaxed kind of holiday for us, just the way I like it.
Wonderful.
Yeah, definitely. So today we are going to chat about books. We have our tea.
Mm-hmm.
What are you drinking today?
This is matcha, which I love putting in this mug because it picks up all the same green color. And we are matching today.
We are
So
matching today, and I
please
have
accept this beautiful mug as a gift.
yes, so that we can have tea together even when we're not physically together. And I
Yeah.
have apple cinnamon tea, which is very delicious. And so I'm enjoying that. All right, so today we're going to talk about three books each. The first category is aliens or creatures who are very human-like. The second category is a book outside of our usual reading or outside of our comfort zone. And the third book is something with a strong female protagonist. All right, so let's begin with an alien or a creature who is very human-like. Why don't you start us off?
Oh, thanks. Those are some awesome topics. I thought about it, and I recently read His Majesty's Dragon, which is a fantastic series by Naomi Novik, who's a beautiful author. I love the worlds that she creates, are very rich, very detailed fantasy. And Temeraire is a dragon that, if you're a fan of How to Train Your Dragon or any movie with a dragon that's not a monster, a protagonist, this is a fantastic series. And I love that it touches on it's an alternate history as well as a fantasy. So it's set in starting off, you're in 19th century England or on the high seas, not far from there. And you think at first that it's going to be very much a piratey kind of a book, but then gets into a lot of politics of the time, Napoleon Bonaparte, and then very rapidly takes off into far off lands. And you see China in that time period and other places around the world. So you can, and during this time when you can't travel or get very far from home, it's a great escape. And it's just a great relationship too. She's really great at Naomi Novik's really great at character development. So
Yeah, she really is. She's one of my favorite authors right now. And I read His Majesty's Dragon as well. I have not finished the whole series yet, although one of my kids has and loved it. But I found His Majesty's Dragon to be absolutely charming. If you imagine the Napoleonic Wars being fought on the backs of sentient dragons,
yeah.
like it's fantastic. It was such a fun book to read, and of course, Novik is just a brilliant author.
Yeah.
So that's a good choice. I am sticking with speculative fiction. I'm going into the sci-fi genre, and I'm going to talk about Octavia Butler's Dawn, which
Ooh.
is also the first in a series, the Xenogenesis series. Octavia Butler was a brilliant African American writer. She wrote sci-fi and speculative fiction, and she won a MacArthur grant actually for her work. You might know some of her other works. She wrote Parable of the Sower, Parable of the Talents, Kindred, and like a dozen other really great books. Tragically, she has died. She died a bit earlier than I think we all would have wanted. But he left behind a tremendous body of work. And Dawn is a great book. It takes place in centuries in the future. So the premise is that the world is destroyed by nuclear war. The planet is not destroyed, but the everything on it is, just wiped out. And this one woman is saved by an alien race called the Oankali. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly, Oankali. And they have rescued the planet, and they have this irresistible need to heal and also to change everything that they touch. And so one of these aliens, which is not, I would not call them humanoid, right? They're really totally different. And one of them has saved Lilith, who is the human woman, who is the protagonist of this novel. And one of them has saved her from this nuclear annihilation and has healed her. And centuries later, she's brought out of this restorative sleep, and she is dramatically changed, and she is going to be part of the rebirth of the human race.
Okay.
So,
cool.
Yeah, it's fascinating stuff. It is really, really good, and it is, the characters who are not human are really, they are very definitely not human, right, in many ways, and yet they're very well, they're emotionally developed and intellectually developed in order to be from a narrative standpoint. I think that they're really compatible with humans, which is of course why the characters can, have these relationships and conflicts and things like that, right? I'm maybe not explaining it as well as I could, but Dawn by Octavia Butler is great. And really, anybody who is a fan of sci-fi probably already knows Butler's work, but if you don't, find it. It's good stuff. Very good.
I know I've heard that author's name so many times, but I don't think I've had a chance to read anything by hers yet.
Yeah, some of it is very challenging. I found Kindred to be really difficult, like emotionally difficult to read, because it's really rough stuff, but so good. Dawn is great. It's a good series, and I know her Parable books have gotten a lot of acclaim. The Parable of the Talents and Parable of the Sower. Those are probably ones that I've heard about the most, but Dawn won both a Hugo and a Nebula. So good stuff. Very good stuff. So our next category is going to be things that are outside of our comfort zone, either because of their subject matter or because of their genre.
Yes, and you'll have to help me out. Angelique has a copy of the book that I read years ago that a dear friend recommended to me. So I read almost entirely science fiction and fantasy, as you might guess by the wall of books behind me, with the occasional nonfiction tossed in. Yeah, I picked that up after a friend recommended it to me. The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime by Mark Haddon, which I know I think it's been on a bestseller list. I know, I've heard about it from several sources since then. But fantastic story, murder mystery, as well as really a look inside the mind of a young man who he doesn't specifically say as an author what the young man has, but he may something in the Asperger's or autism spectrum, so that he processes the world in a completely different way, and you're able to see the world through his eyes, which is beautifully done. And I think so many people, if you have a friend, if you have a family member that maybe has some of the same struggles, then you get such an amazing perspective on how they think and feel.
Yeah, I love this book. I do. And I will say that, I mean, probably like most people, I know a lot of people who have children on the autism spectrum, or I've taught a lot of students who are on the autism spectrum. And this book feels really genuine and sensitive, and wonderful. And there was a play made that was based on this, which is absolutely one of the most amazing theatrical experiences I've seen, because they do such a great job of immersing the audience in a sensory overload, much the same way that Christopher, the protagonist, sometimes experiences it. It's really good stuff. And many of my friends who have children on the autism spectrum have also recommended this book as being a really, a really good portrayal of what they're familiar with. I know that every person has a different experience, right? And the reactions to this book sometimes are different, but I'm a big fan of this book.
You said you teach it, or you have taught it in classes. So
I do, yeah. It's a summer reading for my 10th grade English class, and it's nice because it's in addition to being representation, right, that is really necessary. It also it ties over nicely with our 9th grade curriculum because it's modeled. The plot structure is very much like the hero's journey, right? And it's just a really engaging read, right? Like, it's the kind of book that, my students are about the same age as the protagonist when they're reading it, and it's kind of an adventure that this young man goes on, and they can recognize a lot of the elements of the hero's journey in his story. It's good stuff.
Yeah.
Okay. So my out of my comfort zone book is White Fragility by Robin DiAngelo, which I cannot recommend highly enough. This ought to be required reading for, I think, every high school English class. Like, every high school English curriculum should have this on it, I think. It is nonfiction, which is not my usual genre. It is social commentary, which I enjoy, but which is also not my usual genre. And the subtitle is Why It's So Hard for White People to Talk About Racism. And that is exactly what this book is about. This book got a lot of attention when it was published a couple of years ago. It is very, very current. And it talks a lot about the sort of the ways in which the concept of whiteness, which is not a thing, right? Like, how it became a thing, and how its relationship with racism evolved, and a lot of the understanding of what that means and what the implications are for our society now. For me personally, as a person who is of mixed race but white passing, I felt like this was really important for me to read. Like, really important for me to understand better just sort of the state of affairs in our country, and to some extent in our world, like part of our world, not all of our world, but in part of our world. And I can't recommend this enough. It's
something that I think is so relevant especially for, we're raising mixed race kids. So
right.
For boys growing up, we're really fortunate to be raising them here, where they have not experienced the degree of racism that they would in most other places in this country, much less other places in the world. And so really being conscious of how my reality is different than theirs is different than my husband's. I think it's just something that everyone needs to think about. So
yeah, most definitely. Like, I kind of want to give this book to like half the people on my Christmas gift list, because it's just so good. And it's really, like, it's not, sometimes nonfiction can be, I find, difficult to read because I am a fiction reader and I am a poetry reader, and sometimes genres don't grab my attention in the same way as stories do. But I found this to be extremely easy to read in terms of its engagement, and it's the writing is sophisticated in the best way, but also very accessible. Robin DiAngelo is herself a white woman, and so she's coming at it from from the white perspective, but also with humility, which is really appropriate. And there's also some wonderful, like for people who are interested in how to navigate conversations about racism, including internalized racism, including subconscious racism, because we live in a societal structure that is founded on it in some ways. Learning how to navigate that and is really important. And this book actually gives, I think, some really helpful information about how to approach conversations about race from an anti-racist perspective, as opposed to from a complicit, what I would say a complicit perspective, right? Like, I'm not a racist because I don't have racist feelings. And that's fine. That's different. Racism is different from prejudice, like racism is the structure. It's the institutionalized, system. It's not the personal feelings. And this book does a great job of explaining the difference between those. So I recommend this highly. Definitely. All right. So our last category, strong female protagonists. You want to go ahead and do yours?
I had so many books that I could pick for this. In fact, if we bring this one around again, there are several others that I definitely want to talk about.
Yeah, we can do that.
For today, I grabbed something that was handy on the shelf that I loved so very much. Jim Butcher's series, the Codex Alera. Jim Butcher, of course, is incredibly famous for the Dresden Files, and we have, I think, every Dresden Files book up there on the shelf as well. He also writes great fantasy, and this is sort of a high fantasy with the kind of medieval towns and wizards or magic of a sort, but has very much its own take on it. And because it is this epic mega 6, 7, 8 book series, I can't even remember, but yeah, there is time enough to develop not just one, but 3 separate incredible women that are all different ages too. So you have this young, they start off being around 20 years old, basically in magic college, young man and woman who don't even meet till almost the end of the first book. And then a couple that are maybe in their late 20s, early 30s, and then an older man and a woman who just have this strong friendship throughout their lives. And seeing the way they deal with the incredible war and turmoil, and this is the one kind of book that if I say too much, I'm going to spoil it. So
don't spoil it. It's still on my TBR list.
I'm at that moment where I'm like, I want to talk about, no, I can't say no, but yes, but great character development. And I think it's a great fantasy novel for someone who maybe hasn't read a lot of fantasy before, because you really just get into what happens with the characters as opposed to the story itself.
Oh, so, that's awesome. I know you've talked about the Codex Alera series before, and I think, didn't we see Jim Butcher at Comic Palooza a couple of years ago? That was, did we see him there? Maybe?
Yeah, we saw him there and was talking about the it's a world where everyone has magic except for a few who don't, and they are outcasts, which I know is a theme that you love and that you've been recently. So. Yeah.
Well, that series is definitely on my list. I have to say, I counted up the TBR list. I have a TBR list of physical books because I can't seem to stop acquiring them. And I keep the physical books that I want to read out of my regular, like where my normal library is, and I keep it in my bedroom. And I had 139 books in there. That doesn't include what's on my Kindle waiting for me. So
we add these to the stack. I'll bring them over.
Yeah. Next time I see you, I'll have to get that. It'd be 140. I decided that I'm not going to buy any more new books for myself for the next year until I get the rest of those books read. I don't know what's going to happen. That's my promise, which I guaranteed I will break. But, oh well, okay.
what you've got. Strong female characters.
Strong female protagonists. I've got The Queen of the Tearling by Erica Johansson, and this is a start of a trilogy. The second book is The Invasion of the Tearling, and the third book is The Fate of the Tearling, and they are a contiguous series. So you can read each novel by itself, but definitely read them in order, or you won't know what's going on, because it's kind of like the Lord of the Rings, right? It's one really long story that's compartmentalized into 3 installments, right? So The Queen of the Tearling is one of my, well, the Tearling books are actually one of my favorite trilogies of probably the last 10 years. And this is fantasy. I'm gonna tell you a little bit about it that might seem a little spoilery, but it's worth it. We've got people living in what appears to be a medieval society, but, and here's the spoiler alert, it is actually not in the past. It's in the future.
Ooh.
But how we get to that point, I'm not going to tell you because that would really be a spoiler. But we've got characters who are fierce and ferocious, and the writing is really, really, well, fearless, right? If we're going with all of our F words here. The main character, Queen Kelsey, is 19, and she is plucked out of a secluded life and crowned queen at a time when it is not safe for her to be so. And the reason why she was in a secluded life was actually to protect her. But she's 19 now, and it's time to ascend the throne. And she ascends the throne in a kingdom which is dangerous and disheveled. There is bad stuff happening. The antagonist queen, the Red Queen, is a magic wielding person. I'll put it that way. She's a magic wielding person, and she is terrifying and wicked as all get out. And the two of them are locked in a struggle, like a power struggle, over the course of the whole trilogy. But that doesn't even like cover everything that's going on in this story. It is just absolutely powerfully fascinating. And I will say that her first act as queen, like, well, what I'll say first is that there are constant threats to her life. And there are constant threats to her kingdom. But it is not the kind of story where everything is so bleak that you don't want to keep reading because you don't have any hope. Because the first thing she does as queen when she arrives is she finds, and this will give you some level of the darkness and the violence that we have in this series. The first thing she sees when she arrives at the keep is a bunch of cages that are getting ready to be taken to the Red Queen's kingdom, and in it are children who are being taken to the Red Queen as enslaved children. And it is bad, ugly stuff. And the first thing she does when she arrives, she hasn't even gone into the keep. She hasn't been crowned. Nobody even knows that she's there. The first thing she does is she sets all the children free and sets the cages on fire. So that gives you some idea.
What a powerful woman she is. Yeah.
Of what we're dealing with. Yes, exactly. And it is fantastic. It is a story of complete and utter transformation in many ways. And the series as a whole really asks us to question the nature of sacrifice and the value of it. In a lot of different ways. And by the time you get to the end of the trilogy, you're like, wow, that was just the most profound thing I've ever read. It's really, really, really incredible. It is not for the faint of heart. I will say, do not give this to your favorite 13-year-old who likes Gail Carriger, right? Like, this
Sounds
is
like they could make the next TV series out of that one.
Yeah, it would be on HBO. I'm thinking this would be an HBO series. Maybe Netflix, depending on like where they're headed, right? But probably HBO. But really good stuff. Really good stuff. So those are my 3 for this month.
Thank you so much for asking for my favorite books in those categories, and just for the opportunity to talk about some stories that I've read and loved that I would love for other people to read.
Yeah, I love doing this. So shall we do it again next month?
Yes, definitely, definitely. And a toast to happy times reading good books, even during
Happy holidays and happy reading. And everybody, thank you for tuning in, and we will do this again in a month. If anybody has any suggestions of like what categories you want us to cover, we make no guarantees and no promises, but we are interested in what you want to read. So yeah, I guess we'll close there and have a nice rest of your Thanksgiving break.
Bye, thanks.